In this episode, we talk about why academia fails. Or better, what we may learn from the book Why Nations Fail, about the shortcomings of academia. But before we get to it, we will talk briefly about what happened over the last month. Most importantly, I will give you my report on the global climate strike, as I experienced it in Lisbon on September 27th. This episode is special in the sense that we decided to make it a two-part episode. In the first part, we basically set up the background information, and in the November talk episode, we will have a proper structured discussion. And you have the chance to contribute. If you have read the book How Nations Fail, or are for other reasons familiar with the concepts of extracting and inclusive institutions, give us your feedback on how this could be applied to academia. You can send me messages on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram at Sci4Progress. DMs are open. Or through email, info@scienceforprogress.eu. We actually already had a lively and long discussion on the topic, which you can listen to in the extended episode on Patreon, www.patreon.com/sci4progress, if you pledge the equivalent of $5.99 per month. But it will be a different discussion from the one that we'll have in part 2 in the November episode. As always, you will find a summary and additional information in our show notes on www.scienceforprogress.eu. My co-host is Bart Curtin. I'm your host Dennis Eckmeyer, and this is episode 35 of the Science for Societal Progress podcast. Hello, Bart.
Hello, Dennis. How was your week?
Stressful. I'm very tired, to be honest.
What did you do?
I moved from Portugal to Germany.
And in October, that sounds like a perfect weather choice.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Away from the stinking sun, back to the good old drizzle rain of Germany.
That's exactly it. So in Portugal, we had clear skies and top 20s Celsius, whereas here it's a little bit colder and a little bit darker, more clouds and more rain. That's what it is. So I had to clean up my apartment and get rid of all the things that I had to pay on a monthly basis. The gym, electricity and water and gas, and my phone, which didn't work because for some reason canceling your phone contract is the most difficult thing to do of all these things. Everything else was no problem, was like you could do it online or with a phone call. But that was just, I don't know. But I don't want to go into detail about that. But I did take the time to go to the climate march in Lisbon.
All right, how was that?
Yeah, so as hopefully everybody knows, last week was the climate strike week globally. It started September 20th, Friday, and in Germany it was on September 20th, and it went the whole week, and in Lisbon it was September 27th, and that's when I went. And yeah, it was... I want to say uplifting, but then I'm one of those assholes who is like, oh, those young people give me so much hope that in future things will change. And the young people are like, fuck you, you have to change it now. We're not here to give you hope, we're here to make you do shit.
So I didn't catch it right because there was so much irony at both sides of this argument that I'm not. So they gave you hope or they didn't?
So this is the thing. You see those young people and they are having fun and stuff, right? And it does give you hope. I actually did feel that for a minute. And then I realized, no, this is not what they want. They don't want us older people to be hopeful in them. They're trying to tell us, people, everything is fucked. Do something. Like, that's the whole how dare you speech, again, that Greta Thunberg gave. When she said, how dare you tell us that we make you hopeful. We don't want you to be hopeful. we want you to act on climate change. So I felt like a little bit of an asshole. Yeah, it was pretty cool. There were different groups. So the Portuguese chapter of Fridays for Future was there. Obviously, they have a Portuguese name that I don't dare to to pronounce.
Oh, come on, you have to.
I think it's Greve Climático Estudantil.
Huh, okay.
So climate strike of the students. Students' climate strike. Yeah.
Not too bad.
Yeah, well, I hope so.
I mean, your pronunciation, not the name. The name is quite forward.
Yeah, we'll see. We have Portuguese listeners.
Do we? Ah, yeah. Please feedback on the pronunciation of Dennis Eckmeyer.
Yeah, that's one of the
to read your comments.
Okay, so those were there, and Extinction Rebellion was there, who I mostly knew from their actions in London a while ago, where they basically closed the whole center of London. And there are an adults demonstration. It's a peaceful rebellion, or a non-violent rebellion, let's say. And they have this interesting tactic, or they had it in London, that they wanted to get as many as possible of them to be arrested by the police to make a statement. So they wanted to get arrested for civil unrest in order to show that they mean it, that they really want people to act.
How did they try to get arrested?
So they blocked the streets in London. So London has an inner part that is mostly reachable over bridges. I think there are 5 main bridges, and they just closed them. They just stepped on the bridge and demonstrated on that bridge and closed it. So that's that's the big
But how did they do it in Lisbon then?
So they didn't do that in Lisbon. In Lisbon, they just walked with the main demonstration. They didn't shut anything down illegally. It was all well prepared. The police knew where they were going, etc., etc. So yeah. So they just took part in the what I guess was initialized by Fridays for Future, but I would have to look it up. It's possible that they did that together. So either they just joined or they were also organizers, but I will have to figure that out. And yeah, and there were political parties there. As you may know, Portugal is left-leaning overall, so there were socialists. They had a banner saying socialism and environmentalism go together, basically. And then there were other groups that I didn't know. There were clearly some vegan groups, Go Vegan. Yeah, so it was a great variety of people, young people, old people, different political identities, I would say.
Everybody very hopeful.
So I have this very interesting picture where you see young adults in their 20s, I guess. They're having a conversation, and they're smiling at each other, but at the same time they're holding a sign that says everything is totally fucked. And I thought this is a nice representation of how this whole thing felt, because on the one hand, of course they're not like mad or anything. They're demonstrating, they're still having fun with it, but at the same time they have this dooming message that they're trying to convey with their chants and with their signs. So it's an interesting atmosphere, I would say, to be part there. What they didn't have were speeches, at least not at that demo. I only went to the demonstration, to the march, but they had different things going on throughout the day. So probably they had their speeches at another place.
And I
But
guess
I only
most
had
of these speeches will be in Portuguese, wouldn't they?
Yeah, well, but I guess I could have understood the gist of it. I took a lot of pictures that can be seen on our social media, Cypher Progress, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. And I took footage, so videos, and maybe I'll make a little video out of it.
My week was pretty good. Another two papers got accepted.
Sweet.
Yeah, one was an invited review, and the other one is about the EPO receptor CRF3, which is basically ubiquitous in the animal kingdom. And EPO, the thing that professional bicyclists use to pump up their performance, actually has a neuroprotective function.
So all those Tour de France cyclists are very healthy in their brains.
At least their neurons can withstand a lot of oxygenative stress if the EPO ever comes into their brain. I don't know if this happens because of the blood-brain barrier. But yeah, it keeps them from dying.
And now we come to our latest section, Bart read a book, where Bart attempts to apply what he's learned from reading a book he may or may not have understood.
That is a very ironic jingle. I don't feel completely secure about it. But anyhow, yeah, Bart read a book.
Yeah.
The book's title is Why Nations Fail by Darren Acemoglu and James A. Robinson. It's actually
and is it like ant nations or bee nations?
Nah, it's like human nations.
So it's totally not your field.
No, not at all. So I'm also not very confident in what I say is completely correct. It's a book about economics, but from like a world perspective of why there's inequality in the world. I wanted to talk about the extractive and the participating or inclusive institutions of science.
What does that even mean?
An extracting institution raises the entry barrier for you to participate in a certain societal topic. It usually coerces people and takes away their benefits from their work. An inclusive institution actually lowers the barrier of entry, allows for creative destruction of things. That means certain aspects of this societal context will break away because they're not needed anymore and will be replaced by even better or maybe more progressive measures and new contexts. We can start with the extractive institutions of a nation. And that was it's a pretty interesting thing because they say there's something like economic and political institutions. That can be anything like a dictator, a monarch, a parliament, and that would be political institutions. And the political institutions influence strongly the economic institutions that are there. For example, markets, open borders, etc. One classical way to control the masses in an absolutist regime is that I don't give you rights to your own land. You can plow the fields, you can sow the seeds, but you might not be ripening the crops because I take it away before you can do so. This land situation is actually an extracting economic institution. It's backed by an extracting political institution, a monarchy. And the problem is that extracting institutions stifle progress in any which way. And the problem with extracting institutions is that the elite or the monarch and the small cast of elite around the monarch are actually losing power by allowing progress. And they call that the fear of creative destruction.
I see, yeah.
But that's not, so institutions are not only monarchs. They have a very interesting example of, for example, wool merchants in England that were trying to close off the market against silk and other textile productions from Asia that could be imported.
I see.
And as they were closer to the king's ear than the merchants, they could actually ban all imports of these Asian textiles to protect their own thing. And now comes the interesting part. Overseas trade actually built the English Empire.
Right. Yes, it did.
So you need this open trade thing to grow as the whole of England. But the narrow elite of wool merchants actually could stop textile imports for years to come.
Right.
So this is how, and these wool merchants will never prosper on the silks coming in, but the society in general will prosper by letting these people in.
Right.
So you always have these narrow elites that profit from a certain circumstance in society that will create extracting institutions. And extracting institution means that usually somebody is taken advantage of.
Right.
The most classical extracting and most gross extracting institution is slavery.
Okay. So it's exploitation, basically.
It's more than exploitation, but exploitation is, I would say, in my small-minded, natural, scientific mind, the main aspect of extracting institutions.
I see. Okay.
It's coercing people to do your work under worse situations.
Right.
And then there's inclusive institutions. Inclusive institutions lower the entry barrier into the market. They help you participate in the economic situation of your nation. Having a parliament in which you are represented as a citizen is one of the most important participating or inclusive institutions. How I came to this topic, because I found it quite interesting, that you can actually name inclusive and extracting institutions in academia. And interestingly, it's the question who created those institutions, and you have to do relatively small changes to change something from an extracting institution into an inclusive institution.
So what are your examples for extracting and including institutions in academia?
I would say a clear extracting institution is that, at least in biology, this might be different in your field, we pay our PhDs half a wage. A PhD works more than 40 hours,
right?
Very often.
Yes.
Even so that the state clearly dictates this is not allowed, and we pay them not even a full wage. In any other job that I know of in Germany, the situation is not so weird. People get either paid more or they at least are paid a full wage. So this is, to my point of view, an extracting institution. Furthermore, there are quite a number of examples that I had to face in my career where I would say this is actually falsely participating in the output of a scientific endeavor. Most classically, co-authoring people that didn't participate in the study or didn't contribute to the study.
Right. Yes.
And that again is an extracting institution, I would say.
Yeah. Well, so when you talk about institutions, you don't necessarily mean official rules, but like underlying social contracts that happen behind the curtains, basically.
Yes, this is, an institution in the language of Jameson and Acemoglu, any entity in society. Could be like an unspoken contract or state federal bureau. But it's some sort, but in our case, it's basically where I would say the problem lies is in the higher echelons of academia. What makes the difference between, for example, France and England in the time of the Industrial Revolution? Why does it start in England? Is quite clear. Because the parliament was constructed differently. The French parliament was of the gentry and didn't include many diverse aspects of the society. So the king was controlled less than in England, where many more people from society actually could participate in the parliament, and the parliament wouldn't let the king hamper progress.
Right.
And this is where I think we come to one of the weirdest parts in science. So all search committees that I ever participated in had a clear majority of professors against staff scientists against students.
Mm-hmm.
Even if all student representatives, staff scientists would combine their votes, it would be at least one vote short of the professor's votes. And that's the standard committee here. So there might be good reasons for that. One that when I discussed this with my colleagues was that if we would let people participate in the real numbers of people inside the university, all search committees would be decided by the students because
True.
They are by far the largest group.
Right.
And now the question is, would that be good? I guess it would be much better for the teaching.
Possibly.
But maybe... Well,
Yeah.
I guess so. But possibly it would be also worse for the scientific aspects of a professorship.
I'm not so sure about that. I think it would be neutral in that regard. It would be random. It would not be negative on the research, I think.
So, but my point is, first of all, I'm not quite sure. I'm still on the fence about should we have even participation in that? Should students really have the majority in the search committees?
Mm-hmm.
And I guess this is going to be hard, but I think there's also quite a lot of experience involved in being a professor.
Yeah.
But on the other hand...
So you can also not forget, the professors are the people who for the rest of their lives or careers have to work with that person, right? Whereas the students come in and then they're 4 years there and then they're done and then they leave. And the professors are stuck with that person forever.
But if you're 25, let's say you're a 35-year-old person and you come into an institution, you come into a university and you get your professorship, you're stuck with 17 other blokes and girls that you didn't choose and that you might not have chosen.
There are just not enough jobs to be choosy, that's true.
Yeah, but here comes the kicker. Why is this the case? That's the extractive institution in that.
That there aren't enough professorships?
Imagine a world in which not professors would choose new professors. That's the self-reproducing elite of academia.
Right, that's true.
Professors choose other professors.
Right, that look like them and talk like them. They're all old white guys.
Yeah, of course. Because if you're the deciding elite, you actually have to fear creative destruction.
And Bart has an idea. It's easy.
You only need two very small tweaks. You have to change the allocation of power in the search committees so that they're just even and not biased already. Or you have to change the diversity inside the professor group. And that isn't actually a lot to do. This is basically more handleable than getting rid of all professorships, but it will already pave the way for the ability of disruptive change.
And this is the point where we had a rather long but lively discussion, which I think deserves its own episode. And if you already have some opinion to share, let us know.
I can only recommend reading Why Nations Fail. And he can write us his opinion, or she can write us her opinion on how this has influence on academia and what we might have gotten wrong about extracting and inclusive institutions.
info@scienceforprogress.eu or on social media @sci4progress for Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.
Oh, what's the next episode about?
I think the next episode is is another Energiewende episode on climate change, where I talked to another scientist of the Helmholtz Institute about how we can overcome the problems with the unreliability of renewable energy. As you know, there's always the argument, what do we do when there's no wind and it's dark out? So it's...
I guess we turn on the batteries or something like that.
That is one of the possibilities. The other possibility is to think big and not national, but international, and have a power grid that allows to move power from across Europe back and forth.
Are there super capacitors involved?
I don't know.
Like huge tools.
Oh yeah,
like
yeah.
Tesla-like capacitors. Like I want
that have
one
lightning going back and forth between them.
Yeah, exactly like that.
Like in good old 1950s science fiction Metropolis.
Yeah.
You will find the summary of this episode and links for further readings in the show notes, alongside with a link to the complete conversation that is available to you if you are a supporter on Patreon. Please subscribe to this podcast on your podcast app and maybe give us a nice rating or even write us a review. I thank you very much for listening. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Goodbye, listener.